Yes. Okay, we're recording. Okay, then let's go. Yeah, welcome everyone to today's motivated cognition meeting session. We are very excited to have Dr. Matthias Gruber with us today, and it is my delight to introduce him briefly before we will continue as usual. So the idea is to have about to first have a talk and then have a discussion. If you want to, you can ask your questions, post them in the chat, or you could also using the Q&A feature, or you could also raise your hand during our discussion and ask your questions directly. So Dr. Matthias Gruber is a professor at the Cardiff University Brain Research Imaging Center, where he leads the group, the lab on motivation and memory. And he holds a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from University College London. And he was also a postdoctoral scholar at the University of California at Davis prior to his current position. And broadly summarized, Matthias Gruber studies how motivational states contribute to learning and memory using a multimodal neuroimaging approach. And he's currently particularly interested in the neuroscience of curiosity and how curiosity affects learning and also memory consolidation. And so in today's talk, he is going to present work on how curiosity shapes spatial exploration and cognitive map formation. And so, yeah, please join me in welcoming Matthias Gruber. We are very happy that you're here today, and we're very much looking forward to your presentation. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction. Yeah, very great to be here. I think this is a really great format that people from all over the globe can come together and discuss some exciting research topics around affective sciences. So I hope I can excite you a little bit with my research, and I will present one study that we recently published, and hopefully we'll have some nice discussions. I'm really looking forward to your feedback, as this is like brand new work and we want to continue with that work. Um, yeah. So we all know that curiosity is actually quite important in life, and that curiosity is really a fundamental aspect of learning. But actually, it's very poorly understood. We all just have a vague idea what curiosity is, and the research is actually just catching up on that. So we all know probably anecdotes in life from parents and from teachers why curiosity is important, why it's important to foster curiosity. But yeah, the theoretical understanding of curiosity is very limited. And curiosity, this is due to because curiosity has never been like a proper research field in psychology. There have been waves in psychology over the years, starting in the 60s. But now, actually, since the last 10 to 15 years, this research is really consolidating, and it really is shaped by an interdisciplinary field of curiosity research with psychologists, neuroscientists, and yeah, education, science, also in AI especially. Um, and what I find quite interesting is about curiosity, it's not just understanding what curiosity actually is and why it's so helpful for learning, but I'm really fascinated in that research topic because it might really help to optimize learning in applied settings. And some of our paradigms might be quite close to how we learn in real life. And we can discuss that more after the talk. So our long-term research vision in my lab is really to understand the mechanisms underlying curiosity-based learning and to understand the individual variations in curiosity across the lifespan, and hopefully then also to translate these findings into more applied settings. So if you go online and you look for quotes, inspirational quotes about curiosity, you can find all sorts of different quotes, and you probably can see it somewhere hanging at a university or in some company or in schools. One of my favorite quotes actually about curiosity is by Nobel laureate John O'Keefe, who speculated in 1993 about curiosity, he said the following. He said, nature appears to have taken an extraordinary gamble. The acquisition of information for its own sake, which is curiosity, may confer biological advantage. And also, if you look a little bit closer, John O'Keefe together with Linda Dell, they published a landmark book in memory research, the hippocampus as a cognitive map. And they actually dedicate a whole chapter on how exploration shapes cognitive map formation. In this chapter, they talk about how curiosity might be the initiator for exploratory behavior. And they say, for example, in this chapter as well, that the preference for novelty over familiar situations might reflect the predominant response of curiosity over fear. So these ideas have been published in 1978, but it hasn't caught on to psychology or neuroscience research until recently. So in my talk, I would like to focus, and here's a definition of curiosity. This is kind of like our working definition. Probably every curiosity researcher will give you a slightly different definition. There's no really agreed definition of curiosity, but our working definition is, and that's probably what the most commonly accepted definition, that curiosity is a desire or an intrinsic motivation to seek out novel information in the absence of any external rewards. So how is curiosity usually studied, or specifically the effects of curiosity on learning and memory? So most evidence is from a paradigm, the so-called trivia paradigm, and this has been heavily used in our lab and many other labs across the world. If you haven't heard about the paradigm, so in the paradigm, participants are presented with trivia questions. For example, this one, what Beatles single lasted longest on the charts? And participants either give ratings, how curious they are, or there might be an objective measure of curiosity, how long they are willing to wait to see the answer. And at the end of a trial, they will see the answer, and then there will be a surprise memory test later on, or a day later, or a week later, to test how curiosity actually affected participants' memory. And usually what's found is that curiosity enhances memory. It seems to be independent of prior knowledge. So often in this paradigm, people see that prior knowledge, if people say they are highly confident about an answer, this also predicts memory, but it seems to be the effects of curiosity, this more motivational drive, seems to be independent of prior knowledge on memory. So this is basically how a trial goes. So you would see a trivia question and you make participants think about the answer. Are there any guesses from the audience? Feel free to write in the chat. What Beatles single lasted longest on the charts? Any guesses? I show you the answer. It's Hey Jude. So maybe some of you were really curious about it. Maybe some of you actually during the talk already took out your phone and checked quickly the answer if you couldn't wait for it. So this would be perfect. In our experiment eliciting high curiosity, some of you might have thought like, well, I don't care about Beatles anymore. I'm not so curious. But if you think about it now, what I showed you from the quotes again about cognitive map formation, how we build representations of the environment and how exploration affects cognitive map formation. This, of course, the trivia paradigm that we have had so far to test how curiosity affects memory, this is quite different, right? This is about epistemic curiosity, curiosity about knowledge. So here, the proposal that curiosity may be one of the primary drivers of exploratory behavior and thereby central to cognitive map formation, we need a different paradigm for that. And if you look at paradigms who look at that, mostly in animals, these are the types of paradigms that are used where, for example, rodents have to explore a maze and have to find, for example, a food reward. Or also like in humans as well, in the spatial, also in semantic space, people have to learn how close specific information is to each other. So The question is here now, how does curiosity that we want to test now in this study, how does curiosity affect spatial exploration and cognitive map formation in humans? So before I just start with going through the different research questions, I just want to pitch quickly our framework that we posted a few years ago, which is called the Prediction Appraisal Curiosity Exploration Framework, or short, the PACE framework. So this framework, it's quite general, but what we did there, we tried to synthesize the literature on psychological ideas around curiosity, around how information gaps and prediction errors elicit curiosity, and map that onto what we know about the brain, about motivation and how motivation affects learning and memory. So we came up with this framework where I'm not going into detail here at the moment, but we can, of course, discuss that later, that so-called prediction errors related to changes in the environment or like through a novel environment or changes or detection of information gaps can elicit curiosity, but that there has to be some component in between, some appraisal component that will determine whether curiosity or some degree of curiosity is elicited, or whether actually these prediction errors could also elicit anxiety. And if curiosity is elicited, this will activate the dopaminergic circuit and increase exploration and information-seeking behavior, and thereby lead to enhanced encoding and memory. So in this, I won't present any fMRI data today, but this framework helps us to conceptualize where we are basically with the study, where we are now really interested to test this link between curiosity, whether curiosity really affects exploration, exploratory behavior, and thereby enhances memory. So within the PACE framework, we're moving around here for our study. So there are three questions we wanted to address in our study. First, about exploration. So how do states of curiosity affect exploration of novel environments? The second question is more about personality and looking at individual, like into trait curiosity. How do individual differences in trait curiosity affect curiosity-based exploration? And then the third question is about learning and memory. How do curiosity and exploration about novel environments affect spatial memory, or maybe you want to even call that the formation of a cognitive map? So let's start with the first question. How do states of curiosity affect exploration of novel environments? So we created curiosity, like a virtual world exploration VR paradigm. And this was really led and spearheaded by a former postdoc in my group, Dan-Lu Chen. And this is also in collaboration with Carl Hodgetts, who is a reader and associate professor at Royal Holloway University in London. So here's an overview of our study. If you look at the left column first, here's the experiment flowchart. So the experiment started with a familiarization phase where participants just got used to navigating these environments and also became familiar with the environments. And then the actual experiment starts where people can explore 16 different novel rooms. And at the very end, in experiment 2, we conducted a sketch map test where we tested participants' memory for the rooms that they explored. And I will show the details later for that. So here's a sample trial in the actual experiment, in the exploration phase. They would start at the bottom of a pier, and they would see the name label of a room in the distance, for example, lounge. We will ask them about how curious they are to explore a lounge, a curiosity rating from 1 to 10. After they give the rating, they walk up to that room through a zigzag pathway. And then once they're basically in front of the door, they can open the door, and then they have unlimited time to explore the room. On average, participants spend around 30 seconds in the room, but of course there's some variability. Once they are done with exploring their room, they walk outside again, and then this question pops up: how interesting is the room? So here we wanted to address, like, okay, once they explored the room, how interesting was it actually for them to be in the room? And this is also motivated by earlier studies in the trivia paradigm, where we can see that the effects of pre-information curiosity versus post-information interest, they have different effects on learning and memory. And of course, if anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt at any point. So first, to quantify exploratory behavior, Danlu came up with using roaming entropy measures, also again, basically motivated by studies mostly in rodents, but there are also some human studies that look at roaming entropy measure as a measure of how of spatial exploration. So what we did here, you can see again a few examples of the different rooms: museum, library, and lounge. So first, the first measure that we have is a path roaming entropy measure, an index of spatial exploration. And this basically covers or indexes how much a participant covered the space in the room. So for example, here in the lounge, everything that's shaded in pink, these are the potential places where a participant can walk around. So a participant who would basically walk around pretty much everywhere would have a very high path roaming entropy index. You can see some examples here. For some here, a participant with a high roaming entropy index walking around pretty much everywhere here, compared to a participant, I don't know how well you can see it on your screens, with a very lower path roaming entropy index, like stays around on this side. And then also, in addition to this index of spatial exploration, Danlu also came up with a head direction roaming entropy measure, an index for visual exploration. So this will cover how much a participant actually looks around on the screen, basically, like how much the participant moves the screen up and down and to the left and to the right. And then again, you can see different variations, participants with very higher head direction roaming entropy compared to participants with lower roaming entropy measures. So these are just some examples here. So the first question now was, how does curiosity or pre-room curiosity and post-room interest correlate with our roaming entropy measures? And on the left-hand side, I will show you how curiosity, pre-room curiosity, correlates with our spatial or our exploration indexes, and here interest. So let's start with curiosity first. So what we find here is that curiosity indeed affects spatial exploration. Here we find evidence for a relationship between curiosity ratings and path roaming entropy. This is all a Bayesian analysis. So we have here the posterior distribution, and you can see here that there's robust evidence for an effect here. So in other words, if participants say they are very curious to explore a room, they really act upon their curiosity and explore the room in more detail. But on the other hand, head direction roaming entropy, like visual exploration of the room, is not correlated with their pre-room curiosity. If we now look at post-room interest, so how interesting actually was the room to them, we see a different pattern here. So post-room interest does not correlate with path roaming entropy, spatial exploration, but it shows robust evidence that there's a relationship. Here again, you can see the robust evidence with the posterior distribution, that there's a relationship between head direction roaming entropy and post-room interest. So in other words, if people said afterwards, oh, this room was actually quite interesting to me, or maybe there was something surprising in the room, they actually looked around more in the room. They showed more visual exploration. So we see a double dissociation here between curiosity and interest, and how that affects what type of exploration that affects. So this was the first experiment, 28 participants. We were quite excited about this double dissociation, but of course we need to see whether this is actually replicable. So yeah, so we have here curiosity is associated with spatial exploration, whereas interest is associated with visual exploration. So we re-ran the study in a larger sample, 60 participants, which also allowed us to explore individual differences. And there we also now added a memory test. But just to see whether we can replicate the findings, we indeed were able to replicate the findings. You can see the double dissociation here. So I plot here again, experiment 1, the posterior distributions that I showed you on the slide before, and here now for experiment 2. Here you see the relationship. So again, curiosity seems to be mostly associated with spatial exploration, path roaming entropy, whereas post-room interest is associated with visual exploration. So let's come to our second question. Now here we were now specifically interested, this relationship here, which was our key research question, the relationship between curiosity and spatial exploration, is this mediated by any individual differences? So here the question, do individual differences in trait curiosity affect curiosity-based exploration? So they are different in terms of just touching on the different measures of trait curiosity in the literature. They were coming from personality psychology. One of the newer measures who integrates most of the previous measures is one, a 5-dimensional curiosity scale by Kashtan and colleagues. Here I plot four key dimensions that are important for our study. The first two, joyous exploration, deprivation sensitivity, they have been shown to be almost like the key markers of trait curiosity. These are 2 dimensions. The first one is more associated with positive affect. Joyous exploration is more like diversive exploration. You can see like when you go into a museum, you maybe don't have any specific goals, what you want to explore. You just want to go out and explore, for example, the museum space. Deprivation sensitivity, on the other hand, is like really about closing a specific knowledge gap. For example, the trivia question that I showed you before, where you really want to know the answer to something specific, that's usually associated with a more negative affect. And then stress tolerance and thrill seeking with a more peripheral measures of trait curiosity. Stress tolerance really capturing how much you're able to cope with the uncertainty in the moment. And then thrill seeking really like how you want to go out to really seek the adrenaline and the thrill that comes with novel environments. So what we find here is that stress tolerance shows robust evidence to be a mediator of the relationship between curiosity and path roaming entropy. If we just to a smaller degree deprivation sensitivity as well, but not joyous exploration and not so much thrill seeking. If we just split up these stress tolerance findings, that it's easier to conceptualize into 3 groups with 20 participants each. So we have here the group with low stress tolerance, middle, and high stress tolerance. And now again, the relationship between curiosity, as I showed you on the slide before, and path roaming entropy. You can see that this relationship is heavily driven by the participants who are high on stress tolerance. I find this really interesting because it really seems like when people are high in stress tolerance, when they can cope more with uncertainty or can embrace uncertainty more, these are the people then who would actually act on their curiosity. If they are curious about something, they really then explore the information. So stress tolerance mediates curiosity-induced exploration. So let's go to the final question, actually, in this talk about learning and memory. How do curiosity and exploration about novel environments affect spatial memory? So what we did here in experiment 2, as I mentioned before, we had a sketch map test for participants where on a sheet of paper, participants then could draw, again, we asked participants to draw every single room of the rooms that they explored. And you can see here the different details that participants showed in their drawing. So overall, participants were actually quite good in remembering the layout of the room. I should also mention it's not really about drawing ability. We really emphasize it's really just making a sketch. We want to see how well you can still remember and represent as well as you have how much you have a cognitive map of this novel room. You can see here different examples where here this is the reference one. And then here a participant who remembers quite a lot, has quite a detailed cognitive map, here more like medium and here not so much. So here the participant just remembers one entity of the room, the bookshelf, and then this is also quite distorted. It's larger as it actually was. And then we have 4 different ratings. So we had 2 independent raters who rated basically the 16 rooms from all 60 participants in terms of object presence and spatial distortion, rotation of features. So this is more item related, and here a more spatial component of the cognitive map, relative positioning and spatial proportion. And of course, there's some overlap between these ratings. For all of our key analysis, we computed one average score across these 4 ratings. So what we find is, I show you the posterior distributions again of how our different ratings and the entropy measures correlate with our memory score. And as you can see here, curiosity again shows robust evidence to predict memory. So if participants indicated they were curious to explore a room, they actually have a quite good representation of the room compared to if they were less curious. They remember the layout of the room in less detail. Path roaming entropy, spatial exploration also showed good evidence, not so much as curiosity, but still quite good evidence. Interest, post-room interest, and head direction roaming entropy that were correlated, they did not predict later memory. And we can discuss it later why this might have been the case. And then if we follow up, basically, curiosity and path roaming entropy, like one key question is then, okay, what are the drivers actually? Are they both driving memory together? Is one mediating the other, or these independent effects? It looks like in our model, we find that they independently enhance cognitive map formation, but the verdict here is still out. It also might seem that there might be a modest mediation of spatial exploration of the effects of curiosity on memory. So that spatial exploration is the mediator that drives the effects of curiosity on memory. And we are just following up this work, actually this specific question, with a design where we have an active-passive condition, which is it's a registered report on peer community in. We're just collecting the data for that, whereas where we have an active exploration condition replicating this experiment again, can actively explore, but then there's a passive, a yoked condition where they actually then cannot explore. They give the curiosity ratings, but then they see the exploration of a room from a previous participant. And this will help us to dissociate more like what the actual drivers are of curiosity and exploration on later memory. So yeah, to summarize, I showed you today that exploration is that curiosity about a novel environment affects spatial exploration, whereas visual exploration is associated with interest about the environment. In terms of personality, that individual differences and trait curiosity, specifically stress tolerance, determine the level of how state curiosity affects spatial exploration. And in terms of learning and memory, it seems that curiosity and exploration about novel environments enhance cognitive map formation. And yeah, let me thank you, all the lab members, previous and current lab members, especially Dandu Chen, who conducted this research and really led on this research. My funders, especially the Wellcome Trust, who funded this particular study, And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. So we will now open it up for questions. So if you want to just raise your virtual hand, you can ask a question, and I'll kind of try to moderate some of them. So we will start with Julia Spaniel.
Thanks so much. Thank you for the presentation, Matthias. This is super exciting. And I can think of a lot of questions, but I'll start with this distinction between interest and curiosity, which you know, in your data, there's a dissociation. Do you think that dissociation has something to do with the way you measured these two constructs in your particular experimental setup, or do you think there's something deeper there? And how do you define the difference between these two? I know it's a bit of a loaded distinction, right?
Yes, yeah, no, this is a great question, and as you know, there's so much debate about that in the literature, especially like a whole special issue in terms of what the differences are between curiosity and interest. I think for this paradigm here, also in the trivia paradigm, I think it's really more. I think the timing component is really important. I think it's not so much really whether we call it curiosity versus interest. It's really like something, your expectation before you see information or before you explore information. This is what we call here curiosity. And then interest is really then like, okay, what actually happened when you process the information or when you have processed the information, how interesting that actually was or how surprising that actually was. So I feel like if you pushed me further on that, if we called it, for example, pre-room interest and post-room interest, we probably will see very similar things. And I think especially if we have the subjective ratings, right? Given that, yeah, as you said, like there's so many, these terms are so loaded and mean different things to people. Actually, in our very first study, our 2014 paper on the trivia paradigm with fMRI, we asked people, how interested are you to see the answer to a question? And then later on, we realized, oh, actually, we're talking about curiosity to really make that distinction. And I think the effects will be pretty much the same. So I think I'm not really touching on that debate, the differences between curiosity and interest so much, where it's more like that interest is something much more sustained. I think that's not what we are looking here. It's really like what happened in the moment. Yeah.
Just a really quick follow-up. I don't mean to like dominate, but in the rooms that they visited and where they could turn their head or explore, were there little Easter eggs that were like potentially surprising and delightful, or was it did you manipulate that out?
Not so much. So we had in a previous study, we started that and put like little boxes in there, and that's where we first thought like to look at memory, that we can control memory, that they go to a box, and then when they go close to the box, it opens, and then they see an object rotating for exactly 2 seconds. We thought, okay, this is kind of like how we can control for exposure and learning time. But that then really changed the whole paradigm where people didn't really care that much about the rooms, didn't explore the rooms anymore. There was really almost like an extrinsic reward, and they were searching for these boxes. So yeah, I mean, there might be something. I mean, in a way, these are, I think, the rooms are, in terms of the VR, are very well designed, very pleasing to explore, and I think that made probably was like the main driver here of curiosity, that people really wanted to explore these rooms, but there wasn't anything, yeah, unexpected or an object that you wouldn't expect in a room like this. But of course, this would be a great follow-up, right, where you could play around with that. Thank you.
Kim?
Hi. Really great talk. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
I have two questions, so maybe I'll ask the one that's a follow-up on Julia's question. Yeah, thinking about curiosity and interest, I don't think I caught this, like the timing of asking how curious you are. It sounds like that was before they explored the room, and then interest was asking how interested were you afterwards. So I was thinking about it as quite analogous to reward anticipation versus like reward consumption type processes, and there's been mapping those out as dissociable. So I wonder if that might give some interesting insight.
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised about this difference between spatial and visual exploration. And
Yeah.
so if we think about like the interest measure as sort of like maybe relating to how much did you enjoy the reward of exploring the room afterwards, do you have speculation about a difference between these two exploration metrics and why they might relate to the questions at those different temporal stages?
Yeah. So I think the curiosity, it's a great question. Curiosity, how that affects exploration. I think that is nicely in line with the idea that an intrinsic motivation or motivation in general drives you to explore and to seek more information. And for example, the trivia paradigm and other paradigms on curiosity, we usually see dopaminergic circuit activity during the anticipation, like in the reward anticipation period, which is when curiosity is elicited, when participants are in the state of curiosity. And then there, often in the trivia paradigm, dopaminergic circuit activity is only there during the state of curiosity, during the anticipation, but it's not there anymore when the information is actually processed. So when curiosity is satisfied, analogous to reward consumption. But there people haven't really, I think now with the interest, there's some studies around information prediction errors. So when you see then the information, how much better was that? Where you can, or like how much, how valuable an information is, how much better than expected the information is, or could also be in the other way, how disappointing. There you can look more into like what we would expect analogous to reward prediction errors. Yeah.
Great.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I think I was rambling at the very end about your question. But yeah, that's basically about the timing. So I agree with you that it's really about these differences as we would expect in terms of reward processes. Yeah, exactly. So the interest rating, that might also be more related to surprise, right? So when they saw something interesting in the environment, it could be a global interest, or it could also be something that caught their attention. Unfortunately, in that design, we couldn't really tease that apart, but in follow-up studies, I think that would be really interesting. What's actually driving the interest?
Yeah, you could parse it out with like a follow-up question or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Really interesting question.
Thank you.
Jasmine?
Yeah, thank you for this super interesting talk. I was interested to see like this differentiation that you found between the spatial exploration and the visual exploration, because I would assume that the spatial exploration would, at least to some extent, follow the visual exploration. So were you able to capture that at all in this entropy measure that you computed?
So what the relationship basically is between the two measures? Yeah. So they are highly correlated. So people, like in general, just as a trait measure, people who visually explore more, they also spatially explore more. But also one thing, how everything was set up, you can actually just, if you imagine like playing a video game or going through a museum, that's often like quite natural as well. And when you actually visually explore, we often don't do that when we also spatially explore. So often actually when we visually explore, we actually stand still. And I think that's what we saw most of the time. So it's actually standing there and then visually exploring the room. So I feel like analogous to when you explore a piece of art, or when you go to a museum, where at first you walk around and see, okay, what are the pieces of art that I could look closer. And then when you found something that catches your curiosity or your interest or whatever you want to call it, then you stand there, right? And then you visually explore it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Van?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the talk already. Like great questions are already asked, but I would like to ask one question more about the definition of curiosity, because I am also like conducting like social curiosity experiments in chimpanzees and also gonna do like human infants. And what we thought was like curiosity may not always driven by this novel information. really in this VR environment, everything's are so new. So maybe they stimulate already like higher threshold of curiosity. So people are already expressing like, okay, like my curiosity is actually like lower than like now, but actually I'm in this experiment, so I'm expressing it. Do you think this could lead already this higher curiosity, or what do you think? Because if you think about relation in daily life, that varies a lot curiosity. But if it's about experiments, I see kind of like biases in the experiments like often lead to higher curiosity. So I want to hear from you.
So it's basically a really interesting question. If I understand your question correctly, it's like whether the curiosity we measure, that this is a different type of curiosity that's usually experienced in real life, or like an artificial form of curiosity, or a different level of curiosity. Yeah, no, this is a great question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. This is, of course, like every psychology experiment, right? Once we have a participant coming to the lab, this, of course, is an artificial environment, and we might perform differently than in the real world. So I think, yeah, it would be really cool actually to run studies like in more applied settings. For example, as the examples that I've been bringing, like in the museum space, whether we could actually translate the findings here to real life environments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about it based on your research and your ideas?
What we did is also in this experimental setting, so I cannot really say it's like comparing naturalistic environment like setting and experimental setting, but what we found is actually that even chimpanzees were quite curious about already like familiar objects that they already know for like while from caregivers. Because we thought maybe this is also related to kind of innovation, as you also mentioned, like learning, because like if you are already so curious and want to deeper like give a deeper think about already familiar objects, that may also lead to like innovation. So that's what we wanted to see, and then actually that was the case in chimpanzees, and we're going to see it in human infants. I'm not sure about this, but yeah, I mean, like there are really not so many studies, not even in not only in psychology but also in primatology, due to many limitations. So I also don't know, but at least I hope this what we did could add something more. But what I think would be valuable is to also look in like wild primates, wild animals, like curiosity in their wild environment, because that's natural to them.
Yes.
And maybe that could be one possibility to see like kind of natural curiosity. I don't know whether I should state like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, yeah, just to answer your question slightly different in terms of the novelty, right? I completely agree that it doesn't have to be absolute novelty, right? In fact, actually, the ideas, one of the hallmarks of curiosity is that curiosity is elicited by like medium level of confidence, so medium level of complexity. So if something is totally novel, it might not elicit curiosity at all, because there's no anchoring point. And of course, on the other side, if you almost know everything about it, then it also doesn't elicit curiosity. So there's this sweet spot. And ideas, recent experiments, and the theories about learning progress, basically addressing or postulating that actually curiosity is elicited by learning progress. When you have an optimal level of learning progress, where you really feel like, oh, you can learn. There's something learnable in the environment, and you can act on that. Then actually curiosity is highest. Yeah. Just in terms of that, it's not just all novelty. Yeah.
Yeah, just wanna add the last thing if time allows me. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Because of this novelty, I also thought maybe already like the like threshold of novelty is also very high in like human environment, because think about like AI tools and like virtual like games, because there was also a very recent paper, not really about curiosity, but about like social learning using this virtual game. I forgot the name. I think it's Minecraft.
Okay.
Also that shows like people learn very fast about the spatial exploration and also like object exploration in this game. But like people are so familiar with this game, so I'm not sure whether this really reflects like humans' curiosity to dig more and this novel information. So that's one thought I would like to think more together.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, super interesting.
Other questions? Yes, Sebastian.
Thanks very much. I wondered whether you can elaborate a little bit on the connection or the relation with the personality dimension, openness to experience, because there's large data sets, also how this might change across the lifespan, and whether you see curiosity maybe as a facet of openness, or are these different constructs, how you think about it, and whether you think this research on personality could inform curiosity research.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, openness, curiosity is one key facet of openness to experience. Curiosity and intellect are the two of the sub-dimensions of openness to experience. So like, for example, yeah, from the big five, openness is the one that comes closest to curiosity. Yeah. And that is probably the first one, the key dimension of curiosity trait, like the joyous exploration, really that diversive exploration where you're just open to new experiences, open about seeing what's going to happen, and open to explore environments and information. So they are absolutely, they are highly connected.
Thank you.
Julia.
Thanks. On the topic of trait curiosity, you had this interesting correlation with the stress tolerance subdimension, and that I found that surprising because the task seems so not stressful.
I know,
but what do I know? Do you have any speculation about why that dimension emerged as information?
Yeah, so it's put it up again. We were surprised as well, but there are actually also other findings in the literature now that look at different paradigms like advanced information and information demand paradigms that also see that stress tolerance or deprivation sensitivity are the key predictors in these tasks. So in a way, we don't really have a lot of studies where it's basically addressed how state curiosity correlates to trait curiosity. I think often there are just some exploratory analysis, right, where we just add another trait measure and see where, but we often don't have the power. But it seems like other studies now who have larger sample sizes, larger online studies, actually show that it's actually these two key markers of trait curiosity, joyous exploration, deprivation sensitivity, that they are actually not the ones who correlate with curiosity-related behavior that much. So might really index potentially that actually trait curiosity and state curiosity might be, or how it's conceptualized in these two different areas of research, might be slightly separate. Actually, need for cognition seems to be more correlated with state effects on exploration, more so than, for example, joyous exploration and deprivation sensitivity. So I think we need more studies, larger sample studies who look at this relationship, whether trait and state curiosity, how well they align to each other, or actually these are two separate concepts.
Go ahead, Kim.
Julia, I think we were on a similar wavelength with Matthias's studies, because I wanted to ask about the stress tolerance as well. And part of my curiosity about it is because we found a finding that is sort of like this in our art museum study from a few years ago with Alison Adcock. So it's not quite the same thing, but we found a main effect by which people higher in neuroticism were exploring less. So my first question, the first thing I was wondering here is whether you saw that like path entropy was just like if you had a main effect whereby it was like lower in people who are low stress tolerant. And then I don't remember if we actually put this in the paper, but we had done some follow-up analyses, and people who were high neuroticism were still in like they were going from art object to art object, and they were
Yeah.
still basically looking at the same number of objects, like physically going up to them, but they were engaging with them less. And
Interesting.
so we had a much coarser measure of spatial
Yeah.
exploration, and I like had wanted for a long time to do follow up with the
Oh,
video data, and I haven't gotten around to it.
very
But
good. So higher neurotic people actually explored more systematically or more spatially, but then
well,
encoded the objects in less depth.
they they went to the same they went to the same number of objects. I think we had about 12
Oh, I
art
see.
and but they spent less time with each one, and
Interesting.
it's been a while since I looked at this data. I think
Yeah.
also there was individual variability in how much of the time people sort of doubled back to go to return to objects, and I think they might have not done that. So
Yeah.
the sort of like the global amount of time they spent exploring was lower in high neuroticism people.
Interesting. Okay.
And yeah. Did you have any, like, just besides this mediator relationship, did you
Yeah.
have a main effect difference in like path entropy or exploration?
Yes, there was. I would need to go back to the data. We looked at that. I think there actually it was joyous exploration, just predicting general states of curiosity, like the average curiosity rating or the average path roaming entropy.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Okay.
think it
Yeah.
wasn't that robust, so then we didn't. I think we didn't put it in the paper because we weren't really sure, or there were some, yeah, conflicting findings where it didn't
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I would need to
I'd
go
have
back
to.
to the data to say something more substantive, but there were definitely some relationships, but how robust they were, I don't know anymore. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was definitely, if there was something there, even if it was just trends, that was more related to joyous exploration and not to stress tolerance. So the stress tolerance really seems to be specific as the mediator of curiosity on
Mm,
exploration.
okay.
I
Yeah.
have to go back to that study. Yeah, there could be some really interesting links there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a really long time since I looked at that data,
Mhm.
but it's kind of nice because I think it dovetails with some of the relationships you're showing here with stress
Yes, yeah,
tolerance.
definitely. Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Other questions? Have time for maybe one or two more. I was just had a question on stress tolerance. Like, what would be an example or two? Is it physical stress? Is it like more mental stress? What is an example of kind of a measure? How that's measured?
Yeah, like I think some of the items I would need to go back, but it's something like I can cope well in uncertain environments, or like I'm at ease when I have to know when I have to wait for some information, things like that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more cognitively in a way in terms of waiting for information or being exposed to uncertain information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Kendra.
So I'm trying to think about how to phrase this question. So bear with me a little bit. I this is a fascinating talk, and I've been thinking about this in relation to some of Aaron Heller's work about real world exploration and how that
Yes.
relates to the kind of affective benefits of real world
Yes.
exploration. So I'm wondering if
Mm.
you've thought about how this study and curiosity might map onto some of that work.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. We've been thinking about that as well to map onto that and actually to run a follow-up study in the real
Yeah,
world to see, like,
yeah,
for example, in a city, like with different
yeah,
areas in a city that are more and participants are more curious to explore some areas of the city to others, whether then
yeah,
actually curiosity might actually really be a driver of the diverse exploration and whether this has an
yeah,
effect on positive affect. I think that would be
yeah,
super cool to
yeah,
run to some, yeah, geo tracking and yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Just curious.
yeah. No, great question.
Any final questions? Okay, then I think we will go ahead and end there. Thank you so much, Dr. Gruber. This was fantastic. I have a lot to think about. So
Thank you so
we'll
much
give you a
for
round of
having me.
applause. And everyone can, we will be in touch about kind of future MCM meetings and talks as soon as we get them organized and figured out. So we will keep you all posted. Thank you again.